Reuters is reporting that Turkey shot down a Russian warplane today. This is a huge deal. There are conflicting reports on virtually every aspect of the story at this point. Russia says that the plane was in Syrian airspace, which is, of course, just over the border. Turkey said that's not true. The plane was in their airspace, in Turkish airspace, and they say that they warned Russia repeatedly to leave. NATO called an emergency meeting to discuss this issue. For those of you who don't understand just how serious this is here, Turkey, of course, is a Western ally, and this looks like it's going to tank any chance of cooperation that we had after the Paris terror attacks, when it looked like France and Russia could work together and they could fight ISIS, and Russia is aligning with the West against a common enemy, which of course was one of very few positive things that could ever come out of such a grotesque situation like the terrorist attack that happened. Now, Putin said in response to this, quote, "We will never tolerate such crimes like this one committed today." And then Obama chimed in and he said, "Turkey has a right to defend its territory." So again, for those of you who don't understand just how serious this is, the gravity of this situation, Turkey is in NATO, and they just committed what is effectively an act of war against Russia. And Vladimir Putin, not necessarily known for his patience, if he decides to respond in a military way to Turkey, what does the U.S. do? Because according to our treaties and the way the system works, you attack one NATO ally, you attack all NATO allies, and that means that we would be engaged in a hot war with Russia like that. So I'm on edge today. I know others should be on edge today. The media is covering this in somewhat of a serious way, but they're not giving it the extent of coverage that it deserves, because you don't know what can happen moving here forward. Everybody forgets World War I was started because Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated. And then somehow everybody ever in the world was involved, because this country was drawn in, and then they had an allegiance with that country, and then that country had to come in and fight, and then they attacked that country, and that country had an allegiance with the other country, and next thing you know, everybody was fucking fighting. It's a scary situation, and also, let me just be clear about the way this went down. There's so many different conflicting reports that you don't know what's true. But if I had to give you my opinion or my educated guess as to what happened here, I would say that indeed the plane probably was in Turkish airspace, and they didn't have to shoot it down, but they decided to shoot it down. And there's evidence in the past of the Turkish army not necessarily being super anti-ISIS, and not really being anti-jihadist in their crackdown and their fighting. They're more focused on the PKK and the Kurds when the Kurds are fighting against ISIS and jihadists. So, is it possible that you have the Turkish army pulling the trigger too quickly, making too quick a decision because they just don't like Russia and what they stand for and what they're doing, and they view them as more of the enemy than ISIS, for example? That is possible. It's a weird thing to think about, but, Tayyip Erdogan, the leader in Turkey, is a fundamentalist Muslim in his own right, and I certainly wouldn't fucking trust that guy, okay? Saudi Arabia is worse, and they're more extreme, but Erdogan, no, I don't fucking trust him. There's evidence that he's stolen elections before, and there's evidence that, he cracks down on all political dissent. He locks up people who disagree with him and his administration, and he's just a corrupt politician through and through. He's power hungry, and maybe it is the case that his arrogance simply led him to say, fuck it, shoot down the plane. I'm not even going to warn him again, not even realizing that this could tumble into World War III, or simply not caring, because he is an arrogant moron, as we've seen from a plethora of previous comments that he's made. But my guess is the plane was probably in Turkish airspace, and Perhaps they were warned. Allegedly, there was no response from the Russian aircraft, so maybe they didn't hear it, or whatever possible reason, who knows. But is it the case that Russia was, going to start bombing the Turkish army in Turkey? No, I don't believe that for a second, and if that's the argument that the West is going to try to make against Russia, they could take that for a fucking hike, because I don't believe that for a second. Russia actually is fighting jihadists in Syria, so they shouldn't have pulled the trigger. And I don't even like Obama's response here. I don't like Putin's response where he's like, okay, we're never going to tolerate a crime like this, meaning, hey, we might escalate, we might fight. But I don't even like Obama's response where he's like, Turkey has a right to defend its territory. Ugh, you're dragging the U.S. further into it. Now, I understand that according to the treaties, you really have no choice, and the U.S. is, by definition, now involved in this because we have to back up other NATO allies, yada, yada, yada. But whenever I read shit like this, I always think of, people in Nebraska or Kentucky or California who are in the military who could be deployed to fight in a hot war against Russia. You're really going to do that because Turkey shot down a Russian plane when they probably shouldn't have? I was thinking the same thing when Vladimir Putin annexed part of Crimea, and he's like, mine. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to the American people and say, I want you to go fight for the Crimeans who you didn't hear of until 8 minutes ago? I can't ask people to do that, because the only time I think we should use the military is to defend against imminent attack against the nation. I believe in using force for self-defense. In cases of genocide, we go through the UN and we all do it together, and that's fine. But outside of that, the only time I want to use direct U.S. military force is for self-defense, and the way that we have these treaties structured, we could be dragged into World War III as a result of this. And it's something that we need to keep our eye on, because it's very serious, and you have to hope that they come to some sort of diplomatic solution, because it's not pretty right now. I mean, you have Vladimir Putin and his top officials. There was going to be a meeting between Turkey and Russia soon, coming up. They canceled immediately when this happened. They called a NATO emergency meeting, and, I mean, they're going to do their best to de-escalate the situation. But this doesn't look good, man. So we got to hope that people keep level heads and they stay intelligent as they figure out a way to resolve this in a sane, humanitarian, common sense way.